Daniel had never imagined that a simple mission would lead him to something that would change his entire life. He was just a soldier, one among thousands of humans sent across distant worlds to protect colonies, maintain order, and help where he could. His job was not heroic. There were no grand battles, no famous victories. Most days were spent repairing damaged equipment, delivering supplies, checking security systems, or making sure trade routes stayed open. But Daniel never complained. He believed something most warriors forgot. Small actions mattered. A repaired communication tower could save a colony. A delivered supply crate could keep families alive. A single act of kindness could change someone's entire future. That was why he treated every assignment seriously. And that attitude placed him exactly where he needed to be on the day everything changed. The human convoy was traveling through the borderlands, a dangerous region where human territory overlapped with several alien civilizations. The area had no clear control, no single government, no real protection. It was the perfect place for raiders, criminals, and anyone who survived by creating chaos. Daniel's unit had been assigned to escort the convoy and inspect damaged communication relays along the trade route. Simple work. Routine work. The kind of mission nobody remembered. When the convoy continued toward the next settlement, Daniel stayed behind. His team moved ahead while he knelt beside an old relay station with his toolkit spread across the ground. The machine was badly damaged. Sparks jumped from exposed circuits. The outer casing was cracked. Someone had clearly attacked it. Daniel sighed. Of course. He tightened a connection and began replacing the damaged components. Nothing in the universe breaks when it's convenient. The only response was the sound of the wind moving across the alien landscape. The planet was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel continued working until something caught his attention. A shadow moved across the ground. He looked up. At first, he thought it was another malfunction. Maybe a damaged power system. Maybe an explosion from a distant station. Then he saw the smoke. Dark. Thick. Rising into the sky a few kilometers away. Daniel immediately stood. He activated his helmet display and zoomed in. The image sharpened. His expression changed. It wasn't a burning relay. It wasn't a mining accident. It was a ship. A transport vessel. And it was falling apart. One engine was missing. The hull was torn open. Emergency lights flashed through the smoke. The ship was making an uncontrolled descent. Daniel checked his communication device. Convoy, this is Daniel. Static answered. He tried again. Nothing. The Borderlands interference was blocking the signal. He looked back toward the damaged ship. Military training told him to wait. Call for backup. Follow procedure. But another part of him, the part that made him repair broken machines instead of ignoring them, won. Daniel grabbed his equipment. All right. He looked toward the smoke. Let's see who needs help. He activated his suit and started running. The closer he got, the worse the damage became. The transport wasn't a civilian model. It was something much older. Strange markings covered the hull. Not human. Alien. And as Daniel approached the wreckage, his scanner picked up something unexpected. Life signs. One. Then another. Then dozens. Someone inside was still alive. Daniel reached the damaged entrance and forced the door open. Smoke poured outside. A warning flashed across his visor. Unknown species detected. He stepped inside anyway. The interior was dark, broken, silent, until a weak voice came from deeper within the ship. Human. Daniel froze. The voice sounded afraid. You came to save us? For a moment, Daniel didn't answer. Because he realized something. The ship wasn't carrying soldiers. It wasn't carrying traitors. It wasn't carrying criminals. It was carrying someone important. Someone the entire galaxy might be searching for. And somehow, a simple human soldier repairing a broken relay had found them first. Without hesitation, he ran toward it. The smoke grew thicker, and the sound of blaster fire echoed in the distance. Raiders. He knew immediately what had happened. A transport had been ambushed. Still, Daniel did not stop. His training told him to wait for backup, but his instincts pushed him forward. He could not leave anyone trapped inside a burning ship. When he reached the wreck, he saw a figure trying to pull open a jammed hatch. She was tall, slender, and carried herself with a strange regal strength, even in the middle of chaos. Her armor was unlike anything Daniel had seen before, shimmering faintly despite the soot and damage. She turned sharply as he approached, her bright eyes narrowing with suspicion. For a moment, Daniel thought she might attack him, but then another explosion shook the ground nearby, and her focus returned to the hatch. "Help me," she commanded, her voice sharp yet filled with urgency. Daniel dropped his toolkit and hurried to her side. Together, they pulled at the metal hatch, but it would not budge. He quickly scanned the edges and saw that part of the locking mechanism had melted in the blast. Without asking her permission, he pulled out a portable cutter from his kit and sliced through the bent metal. Sparks flew, and the hatch groaned, before finally giving way. The princess, though Daniel did not yet know who she was, stepped back as he dragged the door open. Inside, 2 alien guards lay unconscious, trapped by debris. Daniel pulled them out one by one, his muscles straining. The woman tried to help, though he noticed the slight limp in her step. She had been injured too, though she ignored it. When the last guard was freed, she turned to him again, her eyes studying him with something close to disbelief. Before either could speak, the sound of approaching raiders grew louder. "They are coming back," she said quietly, her tone steadier now. Daniel didn't need translation. He could hear the engines and the shouted orders. He grabbed his rifle and positioned himself in front of her. The raiders broke through the smoke, weapons raised. Daniel fired first, his shots precise and calm. He had no idea how many enemies there were, but his only thought was to protect the woman behind him, and the guards still too weak to fight. The battle was short but intense. A few of the raiders fell, while the rest retreated when they realized reinforcements were approaching. Daniel lowered his weapon, breathing hard, sweat dripping inside his helmet. Only then did he glance back at the woman. She was still watching him, not with suspicion anymore, but with something else, something heavier, almost thoughtful. "You are human," she said slowly, as if testing the word. "Yes," Daniel replied, unsure of what else to say. For a moment, silence stretched between them. The smoke curled into the air, and the broken transport sparked faintly. Then she straightened, wincing slightly at the pain in her leg, and gave him a small nod. "You repaired what I could not. You protected what I could not. Remember this moment, human." Daniel frowned slightly at the seriousness of her tone. He thought she simply meant to thank him in her own way. He nodded politely and helped her move away from the wreck as more human soldiers arrived on the scene. To him, it was just another mission completed, another life saved in the middle of war and chaos. But to her, it meant much more. What Daniel did not realize was that the woman he had just saved was Princess Kyra, daughter of the ruling house of her people. Her culture valued acts of protection deeply, and such acts carried meaning far beyond what an outsider could imagine. In her eyes, Daniel had not only saved her life, but had also tied himself to her fate. Daniel walked away that day believing he had simply done his duty. He had helped someone in need, repaired a ship under fire, and stood his ground against raiders. But as Ka's gaze followed him, and as her guards whispered among themselves, a story began to grow. One soldier's small act had set into motion something that neither he nor the alien princess could stop. It was the beginning of a bond neither of them expected. A bond born in smoke, fire, and courage. Daniel thought nothing of what had happened. To him, the entire event was simply another dangerous mission that ended well. He had saved lives, repaired what he could, and carried on as he always did. Once the raiders had fled and the reinforcements secured the area, he returned to his unit, tired but calm. The look in the alien woman's eyes lingered in his mind for a while, but he brushed it away. He assumed she was just surprised to see a human helping so directly. But for Sira, the moment was far more than that. As the daughter of her people's ruler, she was raised under strict traditions. Every gesture, every act, and every word carried hidden meaning in her world. When Daniel risked his life to open the hatch and shield her from danger, she saw something greater than duty. In her culture, to protect another in such a way was a bond, a silent vow stronger than spoken promises. Word of this spread quickly among her guards. By the time Kyra was escorted back to her court, Whispers had already taken root. Soldiers spoke of the human who had fought like one of their own, who had placed himself in front of the princess, as if she were his responsibility. Some called it bravery, others called it fate. And the elders who guided the traditions of her people nodded knowingly, for they believed such bonds were not accidents. Daniel, however, had no idea of any of this. The next day, he was called into his commander's tent. He expected the usual briefing, or perhaps a reprimand for acting alone without waiting for orders. Instead, he found not only his commander, but also two alien envoys waiting. Their expressions were formal, their postures stiff with importance. "Daniel," his commander began carefully, "it seems your actions yesterday have caused attention." Daniel raised an eyebrow, unsure what that meant. "I only did what I was trained to do to serve someone needed help." The alien envoy spoke then, his voice carrying the weight of ritual. "The Princess Kira has recognized your act in our way. When one protects another in such a manner, a bond is formed. You are now bound to her." Daniel blinked, certain. He had misheard. "Bound? I don't understand. I didn't agree to anything. I just helped." The envoy did not flinch. "Intent matters less than action. What is done cannot be undone. The bond has been witnessed." Daniel turned to his commander, looking for support, but the man only sighed. "This is complicated. Their customs are not like ours. If we dismiss it, it could be taken as an insult. A serious insult." Daniel rubbed his forehead, frustrated. "So what? I'm stuck because I did my job." Neither his commander nor the envoys gave him a clear answer. All they said was that he was expected at the court the next day to stand before the princess. Daniel walked out of the tent, shaking his head. He felt as if he had stumbled into some misunderstanding too big to escape. When the day came, Daniel was escorted through towering halls of stone and light, unlike anything he had seen on Earth. The alien court was filled with figures dressed in flowing garments, their eyes sharp and watchful. Whispers followed him as he walked, whispers of the human soldier who had bound himself to their princess. Daniel tried to keep his head down, but he felt the weight of every gaze. At the center of the hall stood Kira. She looked different here, no longer a fighter trapped in smoke and fire, but a leader's daughter with an aura of dignity. She wore ceremonial armor, polished and intricate, yet her eyes still carried that same sharpness from before. When Daniel approached, she raised her hand, and the hall fell silent. "This human," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber, "acted with courage where others would have hesitated. He repaired my vessel. He defended my guards. He placed himself in danger for me. By the customs of my people, he is now bound to me. Let it be known." The hall murmured in approval. Though Daniel's heart sank, he wanted to protest, but the seriousness of the moment froze him. He realized that if he spoke out against her, it would not only insult her, but also shame her in front of her people. His commander's warning echoed in his mind. Kara's gaze found his. For a brief second, her expression softened as if she understood his confusion. Yet, she did not take back her words. Daniel nodded stiffly, the only thing he could do without causing conflict. From that moment forward, his life changed. He was no longer free to return to his usual duties. The court insisted he remained near seas as demanded. To them, he was not just a soldier anymore. He was something closer to a partner, a protector chosen by fate. Daniel tried to argue in private with his commander, but the reply was always the same. "If you break this bond, you'll damage relations between our people. Do you want to be the one responsible for that?" He had no answer. Duty was one thing, but being forced into a role he never asked for was another. Still, he had no choice. He began to spend more time near Kyra, walking beside her in the courts, standing guard during her appearances, and sitting silently during her council meetings. Every time he felt out of place, but every time the people looked at him with a strange kind of approval. For Kalira, the bond was not strange. She carried herself as if nothing unusual had happened to her. Daniel's presence at her side was natural, as though it had always been meant to be. She did not push him to speak or act beyond what he was comfortable with. Yet, every now and then, when the court was busy with debates or rituals, Daniel would feel her eyes on him, not suspicious, not cold, simply curious, as if she was trying to read the truth of him. Daniel lay awake many nights, wondering how long this strange situation would last. He told himself it was temporary, that eventually diplomats would sort it out, and he could return to his normal duties. But deep inside, he felt a whisper of doubt. Something told him this bond was not as temporary as he hoped. What had started as a simple act of assistance was already shaping into something bigger. The alien court believed he belonged by her side. Kyra herself had declared it. And no matter how much Daniel tried to resist, the truth was becoming clear. He was now tied to the alien princess in a way he did not yet understand. Daniel was not a man who accepted things blindly. He had lived his life as a soldier, taught to question orders that didn't make sense, and to rely on clear rules. But here in this alien court, rules were twisted by tradition and culture. Every step he took seemed to carry weight he didn't understand. Every word he spoke was measured as if it had meaning beyond what he intended. He felt trapped, not by chains or prison walls, but by expectation. At first, Daniel resisted as strongly as he could. He went to his commander again and again, demanding to be reassigned, insisting that what happened had been a misunderstanding. "I didn't promise anything," he said firmly. "I just helped someone who needed it. That doesn't mean I'm bound to her forever." But the answer was always the same. His commander would sigh, rub his temples, and explain in careful words. "You don't understand their traditions, Daniel. If we deny this bond, it won't just embarrass the princess, it will insult her entire people. They may see it as betrayal. That could destroy months of fragile peace talks. Do you really want to be responsible for another conflict?" Daniel hated those words, because they left him with nothing to argue. He wasn't afraid of danger, but he couldn't bring himself to be the cause of more war, so he clenched his jaw and swallowed his frustration. Still, he wasn't ready to accept it. In the days that followed, he kept his distance whenever possible. When Kyra walked through the court halls, Daniel stayed a few paces behind, his posture stiff, his eyes focused anywhere but on her. When she addressed him, he gave short answers. He thought if he showed no interest, if he remained cold, the aliens might eventually release him from this strange bond. But Sira was not offended. Instead, she seemed almost amused. She watched him with calm patience, as though she understood his struggle better than he did. When he snapped once, telling her, "I'm not here by choice," she tilted her head slightly and replied softly, "Neither am I." Her words startled him. He had never considered that she too might feel trapped by the weight of expectation. After all, she was a princess surrounded by guards, elders, and advisors who dictated her every move. The bond with Daniel was not something she had asked for either. Yet she carried it with grace, never once complaining. Slowly, Daniel began to see her differently. He noticed the moments when her calm mask slipped, the way her eyes would flicker with doubt during council debates, the slight tremor in her hands when she was forced to make a decision that carried heavy consequences. She was strong, yes, but she was also human in her own way, vulnerable, unsure. One evening, after another long day of ceremonies and meetings, Daniel found himself walking beside her in the quieter gardens of the court. The night air was cool, filled with the faint glow of alien plants. For the first time, she spoke without the weight of formality. "Your people are direct," she said, her tone lighter than usual. "You speak what you feel. Mine do not. Here we wear masks, and sometimes we forget what lies beneath them." Daniel glanced at her, surprised by her honesty. "Masks are not. You seem to handle it well." Kyra gave a small laugh, soft but real. "That is what they expect me to do, to appear unshaken even when I am. Though you spoke to me with anger. You told me you didn't choose this. Do you know how rare it is to hear such honesty in these walls?" He didn't know what to say. For once, Daniel realized she wasn't just testing him. She was confiding in him. The more time they spent together, the more Daniel's resistance weakened. He still told himself he didn't belong here, but he could not deny that Sira fascinated him. She carried herself with strength, but she also had moments of quiet doubt that made her real. He found himself wanting to protect her, not because of duty or tradition, but because he respected her. The court, of course, noticed everything. Elders whispered about how the bond was growing stronger. Guards began treating Daniel with the same difference they gave Kalra. To them, it was proof that fate had chosen well. But Daniel didn't see it that way. He was still torn between two worlds. One where he was simply a soldier following orders, and another where he was tied to an alien princess by customs he barely understood. The real test came when a delegation from a rival faction arrived at the court. They did not believe in the alliance between humans and Kira's people. To them, the bond between Daniel and the princess was a weakness to exploit. During a heated council meeting, one of the rival envoys sneered and said, "Is this how far your people have fallen? That you let an outsider bind himself to your future queen?" The room went silent. All eyes turned to Kira. Daniel felt the weight of their gazes too, his fists clenching. He wanted to speak, to say something, in his defense, but Ka raised her hand and silenced the hall. "He is no outsider," she said firmly. "He has stood where others would not. He has faced danger when others turned away. His actions spoke truth, and in our tradition, truth cannot be denied. If you see weakness in him, then you see weakness in me, and I do not think you dare say that aloud." Her voice rang with such strength that even the rivals fell silent. The council ended shortly after, but Daniel could not forget her words. She had defended him, not out of formality, but with conviction. In that moment, he realized something had changed between them. Later, when they were alone, he said quietly, "You didn't have to say that." Kira looked at him, her expression calm, but her eyes bright with something unspoken. "Perhaps I did not, but it was true." Daniel felt a shift inside him, something he could not name. He had resisted for so long, convinced that this bond was a mistake, but now he wasn't sure. He still didn't fully understand her world, her traditions, or the meaning behind everything she did. But he knew one thing: Kira believed in him, and that belief was harder to resist than any chain. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel slowly realized that his life had changed in ways he had never expected. What began as a misunderstanding had become his daily reality. He was no longer just a soldier following orders. He was someone who walked beside a princess. At first, he struggled to adjust. The routines of court life were nothing like the routines of a military camp. There were no drills at sunrise, no quick meals in the field, no nights spent on watch under the open sky. Instead, there were endless meetings, rituals, and ceremonies. Daniel found them tiring, but he kept his patience. He told himself he was simply doing his duty, nothing more. But then something shifted. Kyler began to draw him out of the background. She asked him questions, not about strategy or politics, but about himself. "Tell me about your home," she said one evening, as they sat in a quiet hall after a long council session. At first, Daniel gave short, simple answers. "It's different from here. The skies are blue, the oceans are wide." But her curiosity was genuine, and soon he found himself telling her stories. He spoke of his mother's cooking, of the small town where he grew up, of running through fields with his friends when he was young. He told her about the stars as seen from Earth, how they looked different when he was a boy compared to now, traveling across the galaxy. Kira listened with wide eyes, as though every detail was precious. To her, Earth was a faraway place she had only read about in diplomatic reports. Hearing about it from Daniel made it feel real. "You make it sound alive," she whispered once, "like I can see it through your eyes." In return, she began to share her own life. Daniel learned that her days were shaped by responsibility. From the time she was a child, she was taught how to speak in council, how to stand tall in front of rivals, how to hide her fears. "Every smile I give in the court is measured," she told him one night as they walked through the palace gardens. "Every word I say is weighed. Sometimes, I forget which thoughts are mine and which belong to others." Daniel saw the weight on her shoulders, the burden of being a leader's daughter. For the first time, he felt a connection deeper than tradition. He understood her loneliness. She understood his honesty. They were different yet the same. Their bond grew stronger through trials as well. A new threat arose when raiders attacked a supply convoy near the border. Kyra insisted on visiting the outpost to show support. Daniel went with her, standing at her side, as blaster fire echoed in the distance. Together, they helped organize defenses, Daniel guiding soldiers with his experience, Kyra inspiring them with her words. In that moment, they were not a soldier and a princess. They were partners. The soldiers noticed. They began to speak of Daniel and Kalira as if they were one unit, stronger together than apart. Even the elders of the court began to look at him differently. No longer did they see him as just a human outsider. They saw him as someone worthy of standing beside their princess. For Daniel, the change was quiet but powerful. He no longer thought of leaving every day. Instead, He found himself wanting to see Ka succeed. He wanted to hear her laugh again. Rare though it was, he wanted to shield her when the burden became too heavy. One night after another council debate where Daniel had quietly supported her with a well-timed suggestion, Sira looked at him with a small smile. "You do not see it, but you give me strength. You remind me that I am more than their expectations." Daniel felt something stir inside him, something he had been pushing away since the day of the ambush. Respect had grown into trust, and trust was turning into something deeper. He did not say it aloud, but he knew it. He was no longer just bound to her by tradition. He was bound by choice. By the time the seasons shifted on the alien world, the bond between Daniel and Kyler was no longer questioned. It was simply accepted. People bowed to her as their princess, and they nodded respectfully to him as her chosen protector. What began as whispers of doubt had turned into quiet admiration. But beyond politics and traditions, Daniel and Ka themselves had changed. The walls between them had fallen piece by piece. She no longer looked at him as an outsider, and he no longer saw her as just a duty. They had become each other's anchor in a world filled with uncertainty. When human diplomats returned to renegotiate their alliance, they saw this bond as a complication. "It would be better," one diplomat told Daniel privately, "if we untangled you from this. It makes matters too personal. We can smooth this over with formal talks, treaties, and written agreements. You don't need to stay tied to her." Daniel thought long and hard about those words. Months earlier, he would have agreed instantly. He would have begged for release. But now, the thought of leaving Ka behind felt wrong. He remembered her quiet strength, her honesty, the way she had defended him before the council, the way she looked at him when they shared stories at night. To walk away now would not just break tradition, it would break something inside him. When he told Kalira what the diplomats had suggested, she was silent for a long time. Her eyes lowered, and for once she looked uncertain. "If you wish to go," she said softly, "I will not stop you. I would not hold you where you do not wish to be." Daniel studied her carefully. He saw the strength in her, but also the fear. Fear of being abandoned, of carrying her burden alone again. At that moment, his choice became clear. "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. "Not because of tradition, not because of duty, but because I want to be here with you." Her eyes widened, and for the first time her carefully built mask broke completely. Relief, warmth, and something even deeper shone through. She nodded slowly, and though she said nothing more, her silence spoke louder than words. From then on, Daniel stood beside Calier, not as a reluctant participant in an alien ritual, but as her partner. Together, they faced every challenge: raids at the borders, disputes in the council, and attempts from rivals to weaken their alliance. Every trial only made them stronger. He fought with courage. She led with wisdom, and together they became a symbol of unity between two worlds. The story of the human soldier and the alien princess spread beyond the court. Traders spoke of it across the stars. Soldiers told it by their campfires, and even distant allies heard of the bond that had turned chance into destiny. Some saw it as strange, others as inspiring, but all agreed it was unbreakable. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of the palace, looking at the stars above, Kira turned to Daniel. "Do you ever wonder?" she asked softly. "What would have happened if you had not come to my ship that day?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I try not to. Because whatever would have happened, it wouldn't have led me here. And here is where I want to be." She looked at him then, and in her eyes was no doubt, no hesitation, only certainty. What had begun with a single act of assistance had grown into a bond stronger than either of them had imagined. They were no longer bound by misunderstanding. They were bound by choice, by respect, and by something that reached beyond words. Together, they turned toward the future, ready to face whatever came. Daniel was no longer just a soldier. Kira was no longer just a princess. And the bond that had once seemed like an accident had become their greatest strength.